Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hyperconscious Podcast. Alan, what is hyperconscious?
Once you understand why something is the way that it is, now you have the power to change it. Great conversations with great people and great questions are the keys to the kingdom of unlocking your consciousness.
Every single action that you do starts as a thought. When you control the way you think, you will control the way you act, and you will control the way you live. That is hyperconscious. Geographically? Geographically. This is cool. So I would say make sure that pretty face is showing.
Yes, true.
They're going to want to see that thing. They're going to want to see that thing, Alan. That face. You good? Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyperconscious Podcast. We hope you enjoyed our latest Small Talks episode where Alan and I sat down and talked all about expectations and how you can and may want to adjust yours. Today, we are going to do a Scratching the Surface episode on limiting beliefs. As Alan mentioned, we do have a course up on the website for free on limiting beliefs, but I think that, number one, limiting beliefs are something that everybody deals with.
Yes.
I think everybody on the face of the earth deals with them. Now, you might say, well, aren't they negative? Well, yes, most limiting beliefs are negative, but like, say for instance, it's not just people that have low self-esteem that have limiting beliefs.
Everyone does.
You thought you were going to smash your show.
Yeah.
And you were going to win your show by default.
Yeah.
And you don't have low self-esteem at all. You have very high self-esteem. So that's the one thing I want to bring to this episode is it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much you believe in yourself or where you are in life or
This is affecting you.
Everybody has some form of limiting beliefs. Everybody does.
100%. So beliefs are sort of the very first, that's kind of why we're doing this episode, to be honest. We were doing the course and we realized how powerful limiting beliefs really are to a whole new extent. At one point at the very bottom, you said, well, what's a limiting belief that you have? And I said, well, it's fear, and then it's the story you tell yourself to avoid the fear, and then it's the result, and we'll get into that in a minute. But one of my fears was being alone.
Yeah. And
the story I was telling myself was that if I keep growing, then I'm going to not be as connected to some of the people that I love and that I grew up with. And that story could limit me from achieving my dreams and growing to my maximum potential, which is, once I became aware of that, I got really fired up, and so did Kevin, and we were just like, wow, we got to do an episode on this. So real quick before we dive in, and I'm going to tell you what Google believes is a limiting belief, because Google knows all.
Everything.
Real quick, go to the hyperconsciouspodcast.com, click on join our mailing list. No, it's actually click on join Hyperconscious Nation. That's my bad. Kevin is laughing at me here. What I wanted to say, instead of saying what I normally say, is this. Folks, every single day we just drift a little. One of the reasons why I love books, love podcasts, love personal development isn't just for what I learn, but it keeps me on track. It keeps me focused on things that matter, things that can make a real difference. Never underestimate what one small little shift can do 6 days out, 6 months out, 6 years out. Everything good in life comes from a new idea. That's what those morning minutes really are. They're just new ideas we're going to give you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Get on that mailing list ASAP.
Yes. Well done.
Oh, thank you, man.
Didn't you have something you want to say now?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what Google defines as a limiting belief, even though Kevin told me he didn't want me to read it. I'm going to because forget what he thinks. All right, so here we go. What is a limiting belief according to Google? Limiting beliefs are those which constrain us in some way. Just by believing something, we do, think, act, or say things that inhibit our potential. And in doing so, we impoverish our lives. So, folks, I have a couple questions that I want to hammer at Kevin here real quick, and we're going to really dive in quickly into what a limiting belief is. Now, I want you to think to yourselves, what am I believing that maybe was true 10 years ago, but isn't true now? Maybe it was true 5 years ago, but isn't true now. Maybe it was never true, right? So we're seeking truth on this
Hell yes.
episode. Okay.
I like where this is going already.
Number 1, what is your best personal definition of a limiting belief?
Oh, my goodness. My best personal definition is a false belief that is ultimately keeping you from becoming the best version of yourself.
Ah, that's fire.
You know what I mean?
Strong work.
You know what
I'm
I mean?
actually impressed, genuinely. I thought you were going to butcher that.
No, the words just flow to me like the salmon of the Capistrano.
That's even better than Google, man.
Well, Google doesn't
Strong
know.
work.
Shit.
All right, number 2, what's one example of a limiting belief that held you back?
Oh, my goodness. So before this podcasting thing, Oh, you know what? I want to give a shout out real quick.
Okay.
My grandmother,
Right.
you know,
Memes.
Mima.
Sandra Palmieri.
I was over there visiting
Right.
the other day, and she said, yeah, somebody said something about you guys when I posted the clip, like, oh, what are these guys trying to be modern day philosophers or something? I was like, that's exactly what we're trying to be.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, but it was very negative, so I blocked them. So shout out to my grandmother for curbing the haters. I appreciate
Curbing
you.
the haters.
I appreciate you.
Memes doesn't tolerate that shit.
What was the question again?
Oh, it was what's one example of a limiting belief that held you back?
Okay, so I was actually talking to Taryn about this. I used to think I was stupid.
Right.
Before I enjoyed having deep conversations, before I felt like I could add value to people's lives, I just didn't feel like I was very smart. I didn't feel like I was intelligent or intellectual, or
Why?
because I didn't excel in school.
Right.
And that's the only measure
barometer, right.
that I had at the time.
Says society.
Says society. But I also didn't care about school. I don't care about
right.
any of it. I don't care about
The
Algebra
Pythagorean
2.
theorem. You couldn't even think of it.
I don't care about. I didn't care about knowing the state capitals.
Right.
I have a phone that can do that. I didn't at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, I don't know. I just
This is why
school
it's,
wasn't my jam.
This is why it's really dangerous to create a belief about yourself based on someone else's
Yeah,
gauge on what intelligence is, because
Yeah.
you're very intelligent. Now you believe you're intelligent.
For sure.
What changed?
Jesus. My experiences, my perception of myself did.
How? For the listeners,
Yeah.
like if you're out there and you don't think you're smart, question that shit, because that's crap.
Well, why? The thing is, like, why don't you think you're smart? So, what am I not smart at? There are certain things I'm not good at, for sure.
right.
For
But
sure.
That doesn't mean you're
I'm
unintelligent.
not good at algebra. I'm not good at equations, quadratic equations. I'm not good at PEMDAS. I'm not good at that stuff.
Right.
If you give me numbers, you know me. I do mental math pretty well.
Oh, for sure.
And
I asked him earlier what 90 divided by 3 was.
I don't know why you couldn't figure that out.
Yeah. Hey, neither do I. I was
but-
immersed in a phone call and a mastermind. But seriously, okay, I'm quote unquote smart, right? And
Yeah.
I'm the quote unquote math guy. Why couldn't I do 90 divided by 3? You can also tell that I'm not afraid to look stupid
Yeah.
because I asked that question. Why? Immediately in my mind, just real quick, I know Kevin's good with mental math. And in my mind, it was easier to ask the expert than to think of it myself.
I don't.
It was
I don't know
a
if I
weird
would
way to
say-
delegate.
I don't know. I'll say I'm an expert, but I'll take it.
He's really good at
Math expert.
mental math. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
appreciate that.
Yeah, surprisingly so. I was like, whoa.
You want to give me some numbers? No, I don't want to really do it because
No,
now I feel like I'm under pressure. What was the question again?
So we can go to the next question. I guess for the listeners, I was told early on that I wasn't good at writing and reading because I went to special needs reading classes. My mom told me I was special.
You are.
Thank you. I think.
Yeah, no, that was a good special.
But naturally, because I believed that, I was also told, by the way, I was good at math. So naturally, I'm drawn to math. That's what I got praised for. So naturally, what happens? I get better at math, and then I get praised for it more, and then I do it more, and then I get better at it. So most likely, your beliefs are made up. Let's choose better ones starting today.
And
New operating
and
system.
the whole other thing is like, okay, fine. Maybe you had to go to certain classes
Right.
to become a better reader. If you wanted to become the best reader in the world, you would just maybe have to practice a little bit more than other people
Exactly.
who might excel at reading.
Exactly.
And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, oh, you're not good at this, don't do it. Well, what if you just do it more? You'll get good at it.
You'll no matter what.
I
We
was
always,
never a good public speaker.
dude.
I was terrified of it.
Dennis and Kathy Lang.
Yes.
They came on the podcast and they said you get really good at what you practice.
Yeah.
And they said thoughts are practice too. Like
That's
if you
true.
practice the thought, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, even if you're not conscious of it, you're going to get good at that thought. You're going to think it more, and then you're going to believe that about yourself, even though it's just not true.
Yeah.
So the next question I have, what's one example of an empowering belief that propelled you forward? Because we've already talked about disempowering beliefs, but I want to show the listeners how powerful all beliefs are.
Okay, so Alan and I have this running thing about who can have the biggest heart. And I confidently told Alan there is no way you will ever have as big of a heart as I do. I don't think it's I don't fathom it as possible. And that's a belief that has guided me for a long time. Like, things may have not always gone the way I wanted them to, but in most experiences, in most interactions, I've always been the person I wanted to be.
Right.
And we spoke in shame.
Yeah.
In the episode about shame about a couple times that I wasn't. But I think that's one thing. I have very high expectations and standards of myself.
Right.
And I have a big heart. I love helping people. I always want to be there for people. That's
see
like
how
my
connected expectations, standards, and
thing.
belief
I know everything
are?
is. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
That's strong work, and I will still
No.
forever try to
yeah.
have. Not even try. I just
You
I
know
will.
what, man? There's
I
no
will.
problem with second place. There really is.
Second place is the first
That's
loser,
not true.
man. That's not true. There's
I
third,
was drunk
fourth,
when I told
fifth.
you that.
I lived my whole life by that, Dad. We are quoting Talladega Nights in case you
Yes.
didn't know.
If you are super young, you might not even know what that is.
Right. Okay, number 4. What limiting belief do you believe is the most common that holds people back the most?
Oh, I was thinking of that. You know what, man? Jeez. I think one of them is... I think it depends, because I think it's situational.
Okay.
I do think it's situational, but I will say this. I think for most people, they will say something about a relationship, and they'll say either I'm bad at a relationship, I attract the wrong people, or something like that. I trust the wrong people. I don't think that's a thing.
Right.
I think you are basically... This is what I always say about certain limiting beliefs, especially relationship ones. If you walk outside in the rain and it rains on you, you do not stay inside the next day because you're afraid you're going to get rained on.
Right.
And that's how a lot of people are living their lives. They'll go through a bad relationship. And again, bad is a relative term. There are different levels of bad. I understand that. I do understand that. But just because you had one experience does not mean that every experience is going to be that way. It does not define your abilities to excel or fail in that experience. If it stops you from trying,
right.
that's the biggest thing.
That's what all limiting beliefs are.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's a story you tell yourself to stop you from trying.
Yeah.
Kevin was afraid of planes.
I still am.
Kevin is afraid of planes.
Yeah, I still am.
Okay, the story he told himself for the longest time was, I don't care about traveling.
Yeah.
That story helped him avoid pain. He avoided the pain of facing his fear of getting on a plane by telling himself the bullshit story that he didn't care about travel. You had never even traveled. How do you know?
Well, I went to Florida when I was a little baby. Well, not a baby. I was probably like 7, but
Okay, so he was 7 and he went to Florida.
I don't remember it.
Okay, but you still told yourself that story based on that evidence?
Oh yeah, that's the only evidence I had. Man.
Exactly.
I'd make a great lawyer.
This is what This is what happens. We tell ourselves a story instead of facing the pain. I have a client who struggles to believe that she's attractive. I've told this client that I believe she's attractive genuinely. I've also told her that you believe she's attractive. You think she's pretty, so do I. And I told her this. I said, you can go through the rest of your life believing that you're unattractive, and no matter how strongly Kevin or I or the entire world believes you're attractive, it won't change a thing if you don't believe it first. And I said, you know why you don't believe that you're attractive? It's because you're constantly focusing on the reasons you think you're not attractive. So, for example, I was reading a book recently called Switch. It's by Dan and Phil Heath, I believe. Don't quote me on that.
Phil Heath, the bodybuilder?
No, it's not Phil Heath. Dan Heath, they're brothers. It's
I'll
the
look it up.
The Heath brothers,
I'll
yeah.
look it up. What's it called? Switch?
Switch, yep.
Go ahead.
It's behavioral science. They talked about a study in there that I found super fascinating. I think it was 26 words of the most commonly used words to describe emotions in the American English language. In the English language in America. So they took a poll of the most commonly used words to describe emotions that human beings feel in America. Okay? There were 26 words, I believe, and only 6 of them were positive.
Chip and Dan.
Chip and Dan Heath. So only 6 out of 26. I believe it was maybe 26 or 28. The point is only a third of them were positive. There's a reason why the news is full of shock value content. For some reason, the negative is more powerful than the positive, and that's why we need to take control of it. Let me give you an example. If you're a listener right now, and or Kevin, do this with me. I betcha if there's something that you dislike about the way you look, I can almost guarantee that you've thought about that more than the things you do like. I can name a bunch of things that I like about the way I look. There's only one feature that I really don't like about the way I look, and we tend to focus on that. What we focus on, we're going to feel, and what we feel, we are going to believe. This client was far more focused on the things she didn't like about herself and about her looks. Therefore, she felt that more. Therefore, she believed that more. She thinks she's not pretty. What is that holding her back from? And I told her this, right? She might not talk to someone that could be the love of her life. She might not go into a speech because she doesn't think she's attractive enough to be on stage. It's all crap. It's not true. She is pretty. So if you're out there right now, you have limiting beliefs just like I do, just like Kevin does, some more than others. We need to uncover those. What have you decided along the lines to believe about yourself? Oh, I suck at Frisbee. Why? Because you were 6? You threw a Frisbee one time and got ridiculed? Of course you suck at Frisbee. You don't play Frisbee.
I like Frisbee.
Yeah, I do too. We played
a couple days
That's
ago.
probably why I'm saying it.
So let's go a little bit deeper. We figured this out during
the
course. We figured this out that like this is the thing, okay? You have a fear. You create an excuse. Man, my goodness. An excuse, which is your limiting belief.
Right.
And then you miss out on it.
Right.
And you probably regret it. What is the way? How do you get over your limiting belief? How do you get over that fear?
You acknowledge that it's actually a fear and that the story you're telling yourself is wrong.
And then what?
So I have some examples here. One is a lot of people believe they're not good enough. So at one point, Kevin believed I'm not good enough. And then...
By I, he means me.
Right. How did you get over that? I think you became aware of it.
Oh, yeah.
And then you started to try things and realize you are good enough.
Yeah. The first step in anything is awareness.
Right.
Because then you're telling yourself the correct story.
Hyperconsciousness.
Some would say hyperconsciousness is the way.
Yeah.
Some would say.
Some would say.
But I firmly believe, trust me, when I don't know if it'll be this speech that we have coming up or a speech eventually,
Right.
but the one thing I always say is hyperconsciousness is not a podcast, it's not a word, it's not a training program, it's a way of life. It changed that's the only way to live for me.
Fire.
And that's the thing. Being aware of something, like guys, again, my height. I always go back to this because if you're a dude or a woman, like, because I know some women that are tall that don't like being tall. They're self-conscious about that.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Most women that are tall are very self-conscious about it.
Okay, so
Because society told them that that's a problem.
Cool.
Unless they're a model, in which case then
well,
you
cool
want to
for-
be tall,
Cool
right?
for society. What does society know?
Exactly.
What does society know? If you have a limiting belief, there is a good chance that you're hiding behind that. And until you look that thing in the eyes and say, like, yo, this is controlling my life, and it will never shift until I shift it, then it's going to control you. And then you're going to be living a limited version of yourself, of your life, of your experiences.
I'm about to get very vulnerable.
Okay.
So, for all of those out there, we all have things about ourselves that we do not like. I had a dream since I was 17 years old in Mrs. Puckett's class to be a model. At the time, I wanted to be an Abercrombie model. The whole class laughed at me, and then Mrs. Puckett, fortunately, said, "You could do it. You're so good looking." I have studied the science of attractiveness, the golden ratio, all that kind of stuff. Symmetry is one of the most important facets of being quote-unquote attractive, and there's a lot of evolutionary biology that goes into all this. I'm not going to go too deep, but here's my point. I broke my nose, and I no longer have facial symmetry. In other words, one side is slightly different than the others. What if, and I definitely dislike that, okay? It's one of my least favorite features about myself. This is very vulnerable. What if I allowed that to stop me from trying to be a fitness model? I quite literally, if I told myself the story that I will never be as attractive as a Greg Plitt or some of my other heroes because my facial symmetry is gone, and there's nothing I can do about it, what if I stopped that from letting me try? What if I never got in front of this camera? What if I never took a photo shoot? What if I didn't get in the shape that I'm in because I never thought I could be a successful model? If you're out there right now, there is some story that you're telling yourself about yourself that is holding you back from trying. If you don't like something about yourself, that's okay. We all have something. It could be Kevin's height. It could be my nose. I don't know what it is for you, but if it's holding you back from trying, you have to get rid of that shit.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you said it because I was like, can I? If I ask him about this, will he answer it and get mad at me after? But I think that
And here's the thing: you never even noticed it.
I know. Of course, I didn't notice it.
That's the other thing. Why is it significant to me? Because our brain is wired to look for imperfection.
Right.
You never even noticed
No,
it.
how would I notice it?
Right. So that's the thing. The thing that you hate about yourself, other people aren't even aware of, probably, because they're looking at their own imperfections.
Also, I watch hockey, and my favorite sport is MMA. I see
Right.
broken noses all the time. I love it. I would never notice that.
Right. See? So it's all in your head.
So if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, I would literally do this exercise. Obviously, I would go watch the course because we really break it down and we go through it on a whiteboard. But what are your fears? And what are the limiting beliefs that you're creating because of them? If you're afraid to fly and you're saying, oh, I don't care about traveling, maybe that's a lie. If that's the story you're telling yourself, it's probably a lie. If you say, well, I'm going to stay single because there aren't any good people out there, I'm sorry, but there are good people out there.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the opportunity to meet many good people. And I understand that when you're hurt and you're afraid to be vulnerable, that it's easier to say, and that's the thing about limiting beliefs. It's easier to say them than it is to face the fear.
Yeah, and to
But
take action.
It's far more rewarding when you face the fear and get over it. So maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's your looks. Maybe it's your weight. You're thinking to yourself, well, I'm different than that. Like that, dieting doesn't work for me. Whatever
I'm
it
big
is.
boned.
Whatever
You
it is.
keep telling that story instead of
Right,
finding
and
a coach.
you'll never have to make a change. So whatever it is for you, and this is the thing, this is the hard truth of it. Most of us know what excuses we're telling ourselves, but it takes getting to that next level of saying, okay, I'm ready to be aware. I'm ready to face this. I'm ready to own this. I'm ready to be honest with myself. I'm ready to take ownership because that's the first step. You guys can literally picture me not facing my fears. This podcast would not exist. I would be working at the job I was at, miserable. I may have killed myself by now. I don't know. But, see? You just looked at me like that.
My goodness.
Very possible.
Right.
It's very possible because I was listening to my limiting beliefs. And if you have limiting beliefs that are false, why, then anything's going to seem false.
Beliefs are kind of made up a little.
Right.
So, if I showed you a swastika right now, that's actually a Hindu symbol, believe it or not, for, I believe, peace, way, way back before the whole Hitler destroyed it and ruined it and all that, okay? So, before World War II, I'm pretty sure that was a sign for peace. Now, the whole world believes it's a horrible symbol. It's all made up. I'm not saying not to associate a negative emotion with a swastika. What I'm saying is that, okay, let's say you grew up Christian and someone else grew up Muslim, okay? And I show you a cross. You're going to have two very different stories about what that cross means. Both stories are just a perception. It's still the same cross. And it's honestly, the cross is, what's the word? It's neutral. Right? It just means something different to each person. So just remember that, like Darren Hardy says, your beliefs about yourself are made up. What if your parents told you you were awesome all the time? You probably think you're awesome by default. That's made up. You're not awesome by default. You have flaws like all of us. You just might not believe you do, therefore you avoid feedback because then you realize you're not awesome, okay? And then on the other end, what if you were told no all the time? What if you were told you weren't good enough? What if you were told you couldn't achieve your dreams? That's not true either. Okay. What's something here that I can try to really... Okay. Remember when we were on the phone with Justin Freeman?
At Lyrical Superhuman?
Exactly.
Yes.
And he believes that he can attain and become the greatest rapper to ever live. First of all, even if he did that, who's to say what the greatest rapper to ever live is?
Yeah.
Right? Some think it's Eminem. Some thinks it's... Who else? I don't know.
Oh,
Rap
Tupac, Biggie.
Right, exactly. So whether or not he ever attains that is irrelevant. Here's the truth. He believes it, and he believes it's possible. Therefore, he will try harder than you, me, Kevin, and everyone else who doesn't, number one, want that and believe it's possible. The three beliefs that you must have if you want to take consistent action toward anything are these three. Tony Robbins, when he brought me these, it changed my life. Number one, my treasure is out there. In other words, it's possible for me. It's possible. Number two, I will find the treasure eventually. In other words, it's possible for me personally. And then number three, and this is the one most people don't have, that you really need, it will be worth it when I find it. This is all subconscious. In other words, who is going to pay a price today for a promise that they don't believe in?
Almost nobody.
If we didn't believe that this podcast was changing people's lives and that it was needed in the world, why the hell would we crawl through all this mud? If we didn't believe we could do it, you have no choice but to believe in yourself. You cannot go wrong when you do, because you're going to... There's that quote, don't live with regret. You're never going to regret the things you never tried. Or you're never going to regret the things you tried and failed. You're going to regret the things you never tried. If you have a limiting belief, uncover it, become aware of it, face it head on, and then say, I don't care about this. I used to think about myself. It's not true anymore for me. Maybe it was true 5 years ago. Maybe it was true yesterday. But I'm deciding to say, no, that's not me. That's just what I thought I was. Now I'm going to try to go in another direction.
I think when you were saying if you're praised a lot versus if you're told no a lot, I was trying to think of like a good analogy. But I think it's the what was this? We're not going to do the whole story because we don't have all day here. But wasn't there like the lion who was brought up with sheep?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like that's kind of what a limiting belief is. He had a different limiting belief. He believed. So let me just do the Kevin Palmieri version of the story.
Please do. Please do. It's one of my favorites.
There's a lion, and he's born, and he's hanging out with sheep, and he thinks he's a sheep.
So
No. This is that. Let me do it.
All right.
And you can say at the end who's actually, and they can listen to it. So he, eventually one day he roars, and he realizes he's a lion. Now, for his entire life, he had the limiting belief that I am a sheep. There's nothing wrong with being a sheep, but when you're a lion, you usually eat the sheep. So because of the way he was brought up, because of the the things that were internalized on him, because of the things around him, he believed a certain thing. And I think that's us as people. You ever heard somebody say like, yeah, that music really shaped me. That music really changed me. It changed the way I think.
Yeah.
That movie really moved me.
Right.
It changed me. It shaped me. That's what your childhood is. That's what your family is. That's what your relatives are. That's what your relationships are. That's what your experiences are. So I know my analogy is a little bit different than most people's, but so again, I think one of the saddest things is when somebody really, really, really starts to believe with limits because of somebody else. Because somebody said, you know what, you can't do that. You think you can do that? There's only like 5 people in the world who can do that. What makes you think you can do it?
That might be one of the things I despise most.
I know.
It bothers me to my very core.
Yeah. But if that person has limiting beliefs, is it their fault?
Right.
That they're,
and they were
they're
told
passing them
that
on
they
to you.
So, be as brief as I possibly can. You remember Jonathan Moore when he said, find the eagles with a broken wing?
Yes, Jonathan Moore is the man. Shout out to Jonathan Moore.
What if you're an eagle and you've been hanging out with chickens since you were born? And what if an eagle came over to you and said, you know what? You're actually an eagle. You can fly. You might try and realize you could. Yeah, you'll fall down a few times.
I like the lion story better.
I must, that is like my deepest purpose, to inject belief into people who have none. I cannot even tell you. I'll give you an example really quickly. One of my heroes, Greg Plitt. One of my close friends introduced me to Greg Plitt. And I immediately knew this dude is speaking some really, really deep truths. And I believed that genetically and energetically, I can achieve that physique, or my version of it. So therefore, now here's the thing. The person who introduced me to Greg Plitt, who said it's his favorite bodybuilder, doesn't believe that he can attain that. Therefore, he never will. Even if I never attain Greg Plitt's physique, my potential is higher than this other person's only because of belief. If you do not believe it's possible, you will not even try, and therefore you're right.
You could literally, you ready to do your dramatic reading? Yeah. You could literally give 2 people the same tools, the same building materials, and the same blueprint. And if one of them doesn't believe that it can be done, they will not be able to build a house. The other one will.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing. And the thing is, like, your life will, not can, it will be dramatically different if you not only become aware of these limiting beliefs and these fears, but you're willing to face them, get out of your comfort zone, because it is uncomfortable. But it's either a little bit of discomfort in the moment, or it's ignorance for the rest of your life. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you will not realize it. Like, I am missing out on so many opportunities. You kind of can't realize it because it's magnified.
Right.
There's no way I would ever say I would have missed out on a Brendan Bouchard event in Arizona.
Because you had no idea.
Because I had no idea it was even a thing.
Right.
So,
and then Anthony Trucks and all the ripple effect of
everything.
So all the listeners are going to know that this is my deepest thing. because there's this dramatic reading
Are
I
you doing
have.
the Teddy story?
No.
God.
So that's okay. That's a whole nother thing. But
Got scared.
this is a dramatic reading. This is a poem that I have memorized, and I memorized this 4 years ago, folks. So this is one of my deepest whys. The Teddy story is another thing closest to home for me. But this episode of Belief, Belief is the. Have you ever tried to use Windows Vista? It's an operating system that
No,
sucks.
man.
You can't
I
get anything
haven't.
done. Imagine if your operating system sucked.
Windows Vista.
Belief is the operating system. Keep an open mind here.
Good
Okay,
thing
ready?
Good thing we're not getting sponsored by Windows.
Right. Dramatic
Vista.
reading. Okay. I have this memorized. This is a poem by Walter D. Wintle, written in 1905. And here we go. No need for the flashcards. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but you think you can't, it is almost certain you won't. If you think you're lost, no. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you'll ever win a prize. You see, life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or late, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. If you do not believe you can do it, you will never try, and therefore you're right.
Fire. I was real honestly, man. The selfish part of me was like, I hope he screws this up a little bit, just for the laughs, you know.
I did,
Just for the.
by the
I
way.
know,
I
I
bet-
know,
yeah.
I know. But we're
anyways.
not going to edit that out either because
Because
I'm the one who does
I'm
the
imperfect, but hey, at least
editing.
I tried.
Right.
Because I believed I'd do it.
Yes, you did. You did do it. You got the point across.
Thanks, man.
I cannot say so. We did a course on this, and if this episode resonated with you, I know I've said it 36 times in this episode already, but head over and check it out because I think seeing it on the board,
Right.
like just sit in the discomfort and try to think of like what your limiting beliefs are because again, we get one life, and I would hate to get to the end of my life and say like shit. I wish I would have faced that fear of flying.
Right.
Because now I'm 90 years old in a hospital bed peeing on myself and I can't. And maybe peeing on myself. But I don't know. I think that's one of my biggest fears. I've told the story, and this will be what we end with, but I've told the story many times where I was laying in bed and I realized that all the money in the world, the most beautiful person laying next to you, the most unbelievable car in the driveway, any of that, none of that matters when your thoughts aren't there. Everything externally could change. No matter where you are in the world, you always have your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And they will never change unless you force them to. And that's the realization I had. And it was like, I really got to get courageous and start facing these things that I'm afraid of. And that's the biggest thing, guys. And we talked about this. Limiting beliefs and fears. What is one way to get over them? Pick something that will force you to get over them. I had to be comfortable with flying. I want to be an international speaker. You would get in the water with sharks if somebody you loved fell in, even if you're terrified of that.
Fact.
You just have to find a why that's stronger and more powerful and
Than
more
your fears.
magnetic than your fears. And obviously it sounds, oh, wow, it's that easy, Kev? No. There's more to it, but
There's really not that much more
I know,
to it.
well, there's the actual...
It's harder to do than to say.
Yeah, it's not
But
easy to do.
If you have a big enough reason, you'll figure it out.
How about, that's the thing. If you have a son or daughter, let's just get real. If you have a son or daughter right now, and your biggest fear was to get rejected, and your son or daughter wanted you, it really meant a lot for you to walk up and ask Cinderella at Disney World for a picture. You would not be thinking about your fear of rejection.
Yeah,
because your why power is that strong because you want to do that for your son or daughter.
Wow.
And I think we will always do more for others than we'll do for ourselves.
Fact.
Well, guess what? That doesn't matter. It does, but who's going to do it for you?
That's how I overcame my insecurity. Yeah.
Who's going to do it for you?
Like wanting to do it for others.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like you're in front of this mic because you wanted to help others.
Yeah, for sure.
And otherwise you might not have ever faced your fear. That might be one of the most important things you've ever said. If you won't face a fear for yourself, do it for
somebody
others.
else.
Do it for someone else.
I say that to my client. I said that to my client the other day. I said if your son fell in the shark pit, you would go in after him. You would.
And it's not even a shark pit.
No, I know that's an extreme example.
But that's the thing. It's just a shark pit in your head.
It's
not even dangerous.
The fears are not
Real.
as bad
Right.
as you think they are. One of my biggest fears is rejection. I've gotten rejected 4 times at the gym, and I still go there every day. Trust me. One of my biggest fears is planes.
Right.
I get on a plane now because it's necessary.
Yeah.
You could face any of your fears if you want to. You just have to find a reason big enough.
Was it worth it?
Oh, yeah.
Every time?
Yes.
Okay.
My life has changed dramatically.
Right.
My life has changed dramatically. And that's the one thing that I think I can take to this world that a lot of people can't. Like, I was on the 0 negative part of the Drive to 5. And I think that's where a lot of people are. If you have low self-esteem, it's hard to face your fears.
Yeah.
Because you assume the worst. I've been there. I live that. So I know that it's possible. And I know not only will you survive it, but if you're willing to face the fears, you can thrive.
Do it for something bigger than you. Do it for someone you love. You might not do it for yourself, but you would do it for someone you love. Make a bigger why, and you'll be able to overcome your fear without a doubt. We are capable of the most tremendous things. Like even a simple example, the kid underneath the car, the 140-pound woman who can lift a 2-ton vehicle suddenly. Folks, that's life.
You dig it?
I dig it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Up next, we're actually sitting down with the beautiful Regan Hillier. She is a coach, speaker, author. She is super successful, self-made multimillionaire. She travels all over the place.
Right, next level.
She is next level. So we are sitting down with her
Wednesday.
I think Wednesday.
But it's launching Sunday.
Right. It'll be out Sunday.
Right.
But we hope you will enjoy that. We hope you enjoyed this. Again, this was some contemplation for Alan and myself, but I think that one of the greatest realizations I've ever had is if I don't get over my fears, they will always limit me. If I don't get over my fears, I will always be under them.
Right.
Right.
Last thing I will say,
He says.
Lori Harder, shout out to you. We went to an event in Boston, and she said this: successful people, there is no exception. They always choose the empowering version of the outcome. The stories they tell themselves are the empowering version. I could have told myself I had no dad growing up. I grew up in an environment where a temper was common. I could have used those as reasons not to be better. Or I can use them as the reason to be better. It's totally your call.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will talk to you on Sunday.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening to another episode of the Hyper Conscious Podcast.
Going hyper-conscious will absolutely change your life, because if you understand why something is the way it is, now you have the power to change it. If you going hyper-conscious with us has changed your life in any way, please share this episode with one of your friends, because the more people that go hyper-conscious, the better this world's going to be for everybody.
And if you would kindly leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, that would help us make more people hyper-conscious, and we would be greatly appreciative.
Thank you.
Bye.